All right, everyone. My name is Ryan Susky. As I said, I'm the Director of Programs at the Ohio Center for Law-Related Education, and this will be the Unit 4 hearing for the National Invitational. In a moment, I'm going to have the judges introduce themselves, followed by the students, and then we will begin the hearing. Students will deliver a 4-minute prepared statement, followed by 8 minutes of judge questions. My microphone will be muted during the hearing, and I'll be holding up the 1-minute and time sign, so please make sure that you are paying attention to those as you see them. I suggest that you all use the gallery view rather than the speaker view. At the conclusion of the hearing, the judges will give brief feedback to the teams, and then, of course, we will conclude. Now, judges can go ahead and introduce themselves.
Okay, great. Thank you, Ryan. And this is Kingsway Christian. Am I correct? We're in the right room. Okay, great. My name is Joe Stewart. I teach in the political science department at Clemson University in South Carolina. I want to welcome everyone. Congratulations for being here, and relax. We want to learn from you, and no need to be nervous. You've been studying this. Your teachers prepared you well. So we just want to hear from you today. I'll have my fellow judges introduce themselves, and then we'll have you introduce yourself and your teacher.
Hi, everyone. I'm Diana Owen. I'm a political science professor at Georgetown University in Washington, D.C.
Good morning. I'm Deshawn Whitaker, We the People teacher in Charles County Public Schools in Maryland.
And you are?
I'm Mira Gerbers.
I'm
Sadie Codera.
I'm Sadie Codera. And I'm Akaya Thrower.
Okay.
Nora Ellis, and we are Unit 4 from Kingsway Christian School, and our teacher is Mrs. Nolan.
Okay, great, great. Well, for our discussion today, we want to focus on question 1. I will read that question so that when this video goes viral, people will know what we're talking about. An American historian claims that the ratification debates were one of the greatest and most probing public debates in American history. Do you agree or disagree? Why? What evidence can you offer to support your response? Evaluate the major arguments the Federalists advanced in support of the ratification of the Constitution. Evaluate the major arguments the Anti-Federalists put forth in opposition to ratification of the Constitution. Why did a Bill of Rights become a focal point for both the Federalists and Anti-Federalists? You may begin.
We believe that the ratification debates were one of the most probing public debates in American history because it would completely change the way that people would be governed. According to Ratification, the People Debate the Constitution by Pauline Maier, a Massachusetts observer commented in 1787 that newspapers that covered the Constitution were more widely read than the Bible at that time. Though we have recently had large publicized debates in our government today, such as immigration, there are a large number of people who have ignored their civic responsibility to track political events. To fully understand this historic debate, we must fully comprehend the differing foundational beliefs of the Federalists and Anti-Federalists. The Federalists recognized the problems of a weak government under the Articles of Confederation. They believed that the government needed to be stronger in order to properly protect and provide for the people.
The Federalists wrote organized papers defending the Constitution to the people, and these became known as the Federalist Papers. The Federalists did not think a Bill of Rights was necessary. They thought the Constitution was set up in a way that made violating citizens' rights impossible. While not as organized as their opposers, the Anti-Federalists also had intelligent arguments. The Anti-Federalists believed that the government was very small. They feared a strong national government would become tyrannical and infringe on individual liberties, especially the liberties they had fought so hard to earn in the Revolutionary War: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The Anti-Federalists would only ratify the Constitution if a Bill of Rights was added to protect those liberties. Therefore, a Bill of Rights became a focal point in the ratification debates.
Both the Federalist and Anti-Federalist had thoughts on the necessary and proper clause found in Article 1, Section 8. The Federalists believed that it should be included because they couldn't predict everything that would happen in the future. They wanted to ensure that Congress had the power to provide for the common welfare of the country in every situation. However, the Anti-Federalists believed that this clause would give too much power to the national government. They believed that they would be able to manipulate it to pass a law that may otherwise be considered unconstitutional or not represent the common good. At the time, the Anti-Federalists feared having one person lead the government. They believed that the American citizens would revolt against a system of government that was similar to that of England. However, the Federalists believed that a strong executive branch was necessary to carry out and enforce laws made by the legislative branch. Therefore, the executive branch needs to be strong enough to do its job, but the Anti-Federalists were clever to recognize the mistake made by the English leaders. Another controversial topic that the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists argued over was the creation of the Supremacy Clause. The Anti-Federalists thought that the Supremacy Clause made the national government too powerful and that, if left unchecked, it could destroy the powers of state governments. While on the other hand, the Federalists believed that the Supremacy Clause was necessary in order to establish the Constitution While on the other hand, the Federalists believed that the Supremacy Clause was necessary in order to establish the Constitution as a supreme law to be followed by all states. As a compromise, the Anti-Federalists included the 10th Amendment in the Bill of Rights. This reserves rights to the states and people and prevents the national government from taking them away. These topics made the ratification debate one of the most riveting in American history. These principles shaped America into what it is today. History has proven that the disputes between the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists were fundamental then and are still relevant today. Thank you for listening to our response, and we are now ready to accept any questions that you may have.
Well, thank you. So, you outlined several areas in which there was a difference between the Federalists and Anti-Federalists. Is there any one of those that you think was where the Anti-Federalists were right or closer to being right? I mean, the Federalists won the ratification debate, but should we have listened more to the Anti-Federalists on any one of those issues that you brought up?
I believe that we should listen to the Anti-Federalists when they were talking about adding a Bill of Rights to secure rights, basic rights for citizens. They believe that the government that the Federalists were creating was giving too much power and that it would quickly take rights away from citizens like it did in England.
On the other side of the spectrum, the Bill of Rights probably would not have been necessary because the rights were already protected in the Constitution in all of the articles, Article 1, 2, and 3, stating what the executive, the legislative, and the judicial branches can do to the citizens.
Though I feel that it was important that they add a Bill of Rights because if they hadn't, in a way, the Bill of Rights provides like a strong basis for or a foundation for what like our rights are and allows us to come back to it every time instead of the Federalist Papers and the articles, which is hard to, okay, sorry, but you understand.
So I like the way that you concluded your presentation by saying that many of the debates that took place at the time of the constitutional ratification are still relevant today. Can you elaborate on that and give some examples of perhaps how these debates are still carrying through today? I mean, I can think of a couple of areas, for example, the debate over executive power. But there's other areas too, and I'll leave that up to you to identify if you'd like.
Well, I mean, the biggest one is probably the debate over whether or not the government should have as much power as it does. I think you could look at our state, for example, Indiana. We are kind of like the executive and legislative branch are kind of arguing over whether or not mask mandates were constitutional.
To add to what my colleague said, I also believe that number of representatives in the Senate and House is also still kind of going on because larger states, of course, would want proportional representation so that they have more of a voice because they have more citizens in their area. But at the same time, smaller states are fighting for equal representation so that their voices are still heard.
I agree with my colleague, and to add to that, the Senate allows both small states and large states to have equal representation so that the small states can have a voice and that also the larger states can have their voice also.
Thank you for sharing that. In your testimony, you mentioned the necessary and proper clause. Could you provide some examples of the need for the necessary and proper clause within the Constitution?
Well, I mean, the necessary and proper clause was created so that if something happened that the founders didn't think of at the time when they were writing the Constitution, that the government could still handle it and control the situation. Like, for example, nobody were going to have a pandemic.
And to add on to that, it was like used to pass COVID relief bills and the stimulus checks. That was needed because the founders would have no idea that we would be under such hard times that the government would need to step in to help citizens out.
I agree with my colleagues, and I also would like to add that the necessary and proper clause would also been used to provide max mandates to protect the citizen during the pandemic.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned that the anti-federalists were concerned that there would be too much power exercised by the national government. Yet there in Indiana, when Mr. Timms a few years ago was arrested, it was the state that attempted to seize his automobile that was worth more than the fine that he was asked to pay. Should we be worried just about power exercised at the national level? What about power at the state level also?
I think like the powers that the state government has can also protect the people, but also there are also some times that they go over, like in that situation when they arrested him for his automobile. And so like if they had a reason for it, then they could go ahead and do it. But in the amendments, they say that no unreasonable searches and seizures. So for that reason, the national government and the state level governments can overstep over their power, but that's why we have checks and balances to make sure that both governments are balanced together and that they don't infringe on the citizens' rights.
But at the same time, there are times like the funding in schools that the national government has really taken away powers that have been given to the state specifically. And I feel like that's somewhere that you can see that the national government has been trying to take more power because education has kind of been more reliant in the past years on funding from the national government versus the state or local governments.
I mean, to add on to what my colleagues have said, I think you should be wary of abuse of power in all forms of government, whether it's local, state, or national, because it's easy to abuse power and it's harder to relinquish it.
So I'd like to follow up on this discussion about, kind of balance of power and the strength of different aspects of government. How do you feel the balance of power is between the federal executive and the legislative branch in light of what the founders, what their fears were and what their concerns were at the time of the ratification?
Could you please rephrase that question?
Yes. Do you think that today, oh, okay. I was
Well-
basically trying to say, basically, and I didn't phrase it very well to begin with, that do you feel that the founders were right about the executive, not wanting the executive to have too much power and wanting the legislature to have more power because it's more representative of the people, but I didn't do a good job of phrasing it.
And you'll have to, we'll never know your answer to that, but you can tell future general people about this. Thank you. Very good job. Well, yeah, I think you did a very good job. You chose a good way of making the point about how public the debate was by pointing out that, or citing the authority saying that more people were reading about the debate than were reading the Bible at the time. And then you did a very good job of identifying some key issues that separated the Federalist and Anti-Federalist, the necessary and proper clause, executive power, and supremacy clause. And I wish we'd have a little bit more time to talk about the fact if they don't, I mean, you had a good check on that with the 9th and 10th Amendment, but it is, I think the supremacy clause is the major difference between the Articles of Confederation and the US Constitution. If we don't have that, then it's not clear why you would want to move away from the Articles of Confederation. And in response to my colleague, you're able to pull this up into some contemporary examples. And as I said, one of the most recent examples comes from your state of Indiana. So I very much enjoyed the conversation. I have confidence that you will be able to take this knowledge and use it as you go forward.
Yeah, I agree with my colleague. I thought you did a really excellent job with your opening statement. I also was struck by the fact that I didn't know that there was more discussion of this debate over the Constitution than there was about the Bible, which I thought that was really interesting. I thought you did a really excellent job of describing who the Federalist and Anti-Federalist were and what their positions were. That you were very clear on that. And you showed a strong knowledge throughout both your prepared statement and your the Q&A of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and different provisions. And I especially liked the answer to my first question about which stemmed from your closing statement, which I thought was really a good way to close because it opened up a whole area for questionings about how do we make these arguments, or are they still relevant today? And you did just a great job. I love the Indiana argument about the mask mandates and raising the issue about, kind of the concerns about the number of members of the House and Senate. Just this week has been making headlines because of the census and the reapportionment of the representatives in Congress. So that was really good. And also the acknowledgement about how the Senate and the House represent, different constituencies, small and large states, and how that carries through even to today. So I really like that. And, bringing up the COVID relief bills and really relating it to things today, school funding and those debates. I just really appreciated the fact that you were able to make these strong connections between the history and the present time. So great job.
Yes, and I agree with everything that my colleague said. I enjoy speaking with you today, especially because you were able to bring such today's context. You talked about the publicization of the immigration conversation. And then, of course, we talked about COVID and how that's a topic as well. But as Dr. Owen mentioned, I like that you talked about representation, because that, as she said, that has been the controversy this week in the news and how the seats are being reapportioned. So thank you for everything that you presented today, and I enjoyed listening to you.
Thank you again, and thanks to your teacher for having you so well prepared.
Thank you. Thank you.
Congratulations,
you.
everyone.
Thank you.